He's a lecturer at Sha'anan Academic College. His research focuses mainly on math education. He's a member of the curricular committee in the Ministry of Education in Israel, as well as member of the Israel's High Commission of Mathematics. He won the Israel Education Prize and has recently published innovative ideas in a series on mathematics focusing on origometria, paper folding for teaching geometry in preschool and primary school. So it's your stage.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to reflect on the subject of numeracy, or what we call today numerical literacy. The first time in history that we find the term numeracy or numerical literacy is approximately over 60 years, not more. In a report in England, in the UK, and it was stated in this way: the ability with or knowledge of numbers. That was the first definition that was given. By the mid-60s, we have a different meaning. It has shifted from computation of numbers to the ability to interpret data and make sense of the world through business, science, and technology. In the 1970s, numeracy came to include the ability to reason. And numeracy after that was not seen simply in the area of mathematics, but in all fields, will permeate all fields of study. I think you would all accept that numeracy has an increasingly important role in enabling and sustaining cultural, social, and economic and technological advances. So I want to reflect on my thoughts after many years being involved in mathematics education, in training as a headmaster, and being with pupils all the time. And I feel that we have not achieved any decline in numerical illiteracy over the years in Western countries. What has changed are the terms from number sense, computation, computeral or quantitative literacy, functional literacy, as the UNESCO said in 1978, number sense especially, there's been a lot of stress on. On the other hand, a lot of work has been done in the field of literacy. So we have terms now of mathematical discourse in the classroom, or maths talks in the classroom. And so just as literacy is much more than decoding or spelling and grammar, so too is in the same way numeracy is much more than math, facts, and computation. I had an experience over the weekend. I deal with a lot of children in different contexts. I asked a few children from primary school over our short weekend in Israel that you have a computer, you have a calculator on your phone. And they said, yes. Would you open it, please? They opened the calculator, and I said, look, just think for a minute that the button of 1 and of 5 and 0 are out of action. Okay? Now, can you write me two numbers, 3-digit numbers, so that if you subtract them, you would have on the screen 150? I won't test you now. One of the children said, it's very difficult for me to do this because in the classroom, we only do subtraction questions where you have the two numbers and we have to subtract them. But I've never had a case where I've been given the result and I have to find out what the question was. Another child said, no, that's very easy. I can do a sum quite well. I know that 150 is 75 and another 75. So why can't I print with my computer, with my calculator, 74 plus 76, and I get 150. And there were varied reactions with the children. So the word fluency has become extremely important in the field of numeracy, or what we call today numerical literacy. And fluency doesn't mean able to use an algorithm, does not mean being fast and accurate alone. So I want you to see what the situation is. These are figures and they haven't changed at all, etc. The low numeracy adults, etc. Those born, I'm taking the figures from the United States, born in the United States, and those born outside the United States. Now, what surprises me, that the children are growing up in an environment where they don't need to use money. They have a credit card, or they get on the bus with a card, and maybe on their iPhone they pay with it. They go to a shop to buy, no money is handed at all. I think as a child, I did a lot of my number work while we had money to pay, and I had to make sure that I got the correct change when I passed a coin along. So what has changed? Calculating tools are available on your watch, on your iPhone, on your tablet, on the computer. What has changed? Social media, TV, internet, etc. Data is being given to people in different forms, graphical, numerical, and a lot of data is available. And yet, we are finding that, as I said before, large numbers of people. Now, in the recent test in England, where they've opened a number strategy, they found that 29% of the population have no numeracy or numerical literacy above what primary school children learn from grades 1 to 6. And with moving populations in many countries, this won't get better. So how would we define and how different elements of, or with the components of numeracy awareness and numeracy knowledge and understanding? Awareness is the importance of numeracy, etc. To make them, for children to feel that they're more informed, the learning awareness, etc. They need to know tasks and face tasks that involve numeracy. And students are aware that numeracy demands within a task which is not necessarily a mathematical task. Now, what is interesting is the terminology used today. Instead of simply saying numerical literacy, you have now a whole group of names like computational thinking, quantitative literacy, functional literacy, financial literacy, as though these names will these terms will make a difference. What I have found is there has been no real attention to changes in curricula over the last perhaps 60 years that I'm familiar with the curricula. There has been attempts of the core curriculum in America. There have been attempts in most countries to change curricula, but basically they remain in the form of what has been the historical development of numbers, whole numbers, decimal numbers, and so on, without realizing that the children are in an environment which is completely different than the environment that I grew up in, and many of us. So I feel that if we want to talk about numeracy, we have to see these points. To be confident with numbers at work, in the news, on payslip, with your children, and when managing your money. That means the social side, or the side of society in numeracy, has a big place. Feeling able to apply for a new job or training that involves numbers or data. Using a calculator to work something else, or knowing what to Google and being able to tell if you get a sensible answer. That's what's called number sense today. Being confident with time, for instance, when planning your journeys. Understanding what percentages mean and how they are used. Knowing when an estimate will do. If we see the next slide, we'll see numeracy is not feeling pressure to work things out quickly, or memorizing methods or times tables. I now have the feeling that grade 1 children should have in front of them the tables immediately available to them on the desk. An addition table, a hundreds table, 1,000 tables, a multiplication table, and not building on it, but using what is available and understanding that a certain question or problem, a real life problem, to be able to decide whether the operation of multiplication is the correct one for this particular real life problem. We carry on. Here is an Australian model of numeracy. It's very, very interesting because a lot of work is being done in Australia because of the changes of population. It's a country like Canada, have many immigrants from many different backgrounds. See what is taken into account now of numeracy. Dispositions, citizenship, and tools. But basically in the middle is the context, the flexibility, the confidence, initiative, and the risk are important things to be shown in these, to be able to deal with the different contexts. Representation, physical and digital, which is obvious today, and problem solving, estimation, concepts, and skills. And as I said before, there's the personal and social and the work side. And what is the mathematical knowledge that is needed in this particular case? If we carry on, we can see how they say a numeracy problem solving cycle should be. Identify the maths from the context. The children are not familiar enough with different contexts which don't seem immediately to be a mathematical context, but with proper interest, the ability to understand the context, they understand or identify also maths from the context. Act as a result and use mathematics, evaluate and reflect, communicate and report. That is a cycle that is being developed in the teaching of numeracy in schools in many countries today. If we carry on in the next slide, I think this for me means the most when I connect literacy with numerical literacy or numeracy. Just as literacy is much more than decoding, spelling, and grammar, so too is numeracy much more than maths, facts, and computation. Just as we wish to immerse our children in a world of literacy, in which they can develop skills and attitudes that enable them to understand, learn, appreciate, and communicate, so too do we want them to have the attitudes and skills that enable them to make sense of, feel successful in, see the beauty in, and pursue opportunities in the world of numeracy. How can we develop a culture of success in numeracy, in numerical literacy, etc.? And we can move on there. I wanted to stress, etc. And we need more open, numerous definitions that focus on what people do with their basic skills, with whom, when, and how. Move on. Some of you may be familiar with Stephen Redder from Portland State University. He's a emeritus professor of applied linguistics. He said the following items here, if we move on. He took all these terms, as I mentioned before, that are floating around and said quite clearly that if we cannot improve the situation concerning numerical illiteracy, then we are going to have a society which will not bring together people in all situations, in live situations, at work, and at play, in the home, in the house, in the family. And he's discussed this in many of his articles in this field. And so he printed out this picture here of all the different sides of what we call numerical literacy today. As I said before, my feeling is that the curricula in mathematics, and especially in the primary school, dealing with numeracy, there is not enough attention to real life context, citizenship, work, personal, social life, etc., and not enough application of mathematical knowledge to problem solving, estimation, and skills, using of different tools to represent the information, representational, physical, digital, etc. And, as I said before, creating a culture of success, promotion of positive dispositions towards the use of mathematics to solve problems encountered in day-to-day life, confidence, flexibility, initiative, and risk. And the orientation is a critical orientation to interpreting mathematical results and making evidence-based judgments. Those are my feelings, some of my feelings today on this issue of numerical literacy. I'm happy to know that a lot of research has been done in the field of literacy. I haven't seen a lot of research being done in the field of numerical literacy. And I think the people and the scholars who are dealing with literacy should go back to what was called by the UNESCO, as I mentioned before, and I'm reading from the document of 1978. A person is functionally literate who can engage in all those activities in which literacy is required for effective functioning of his group and community, and also for enabling him to continue to use reading, writing, and calculation for his own and the community's development. I don't think that has changed. So if the people who are dealing with, the scholars who are dealing with literacy would join onto their work, also the question of numeracy or numerical literacy, then we may see some change, not only in the methods of teaching, but in the content and in the curricula. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to, do you have any questions?
Yes, I want to ask something.
Yes.
I want to share, Johnny, I want to share that when my children, my twins were in high school, they always complained, why do I need math? they had okay grades, you know, fine grades, but they always complain they have to practice and they don't understand why they need it. So I scheduled a meeting with a mathematician that will explain why we need math in life, because it was hard for me to explain them this, because they asked me about specific, you know, procedures in math, and I don't remember them. I have to be, you know, honest. So after that, they didn't ask it anymore and they just learned math. But I don't know, it was because they were afraid that I will schedule another meeting or because they really understood the context of math.
Yes, well, it's, as I mentioned before, the contexts of teaching mathematics or where mathematical knowledge is needed are not real life problems with the children. In high school, they learn theorems in geometry in grade 9 and 10, and you ask them, what the hell, I need these things. Euclid played with them thousands of years ago. He had nothing else to do. What do I need to do with it? And I think this is basic problem. And it's very interesting now. There's a group in the UK, which I'm attached to, who are trying to bring into teaching real life situations, right? For example, you can say to them, there's a chocolate factory, has branches, one famous one in Israel, in Safed, in Tel Aviv, and in Dimona. They produce chocolate products, but not each of the factories produces all of them. Now, I have a shop in another town, and I need certain items, and they have to be transported from different places, but the cost of transporting from Dimona, who may not have this product, and in other places and so on, I can go on and on with real life situations. I think that will help children understand why I have to have these mathematical skills.
Well, I would like to ask something. As a teacher of statistics, can you think of what are the borders between statistics and mathematics? Because, you know, some of the practical problems that you were talking about, you can find them in statistics.
Very much.
Also students of statistics, they don't understand why they have to learn statistics when they are studying education, for example, or other social sciences.
I know the problem very, very well. Once again, I think it's also the question of context of where statistics is applied in day-to-day life, right? I like to take with young children advertisements from the newspaper. Maybe that this company has more prices that are lower and they can prove it by this and this and that and so on. There is a tremendous amount of data around which the children are connected with because it's lifestyles, right? They know what a supermarket is, a shop and so on, right? That's why so much stress today has been putting on, even in the new Israeli program, on financial literacy at an early age. Right? And somehow the statistics, which is very, very, I remember studying statistics myself, I didn't enjoy it, not at all. And I don't think there were many in the class that enjoyed it as well. And I know finding statisticians is a very difficult problem. To employ people who have doctorates in statistics, you have to look very, very hard. And I do feel that at a much earlier age, the question of statistics must come in. It doesn't need to be called statistics, but usually dealing with numerical illiteracy, which includes statistics at a much earlier age, will give them a feeling that, well, I must have the skills and I must know the tools to be able to deal with such and such problems. But I understand you perfectly.
Yuval wants to ask a question.
Not exactly a question, but I want to say two things. we have a colleague near Western Galilee College called Rona Aroni, and he wrote a book. I don't know, maybe it's only in Hebrew, but he talks exactly about these problems. And he says that
I've got them on my shelf.
Okay. So
He's that other one.
So that's good. That's good. That's the first thing. And another thing I want to say is one answer that you can give about literacy. Why do you need mathematics? So I studied in Gimnasia Herzliya in Tel Aviv, and one of the manager there, when he passed away, his student talked about it. He was a mathematical teacher, and he said when he entered the first class, he said to his students, "Listen, I know what I'm going to teach you within this year. You're not going to use it, but I teach something else, which is very important. I teach you to think. And thinking, and I know that if you're talking to a mathematician about history, he is a better analyzer of history than anybody else. You see, because he knows how to think logically, and so you could say it's an indirect benefit. When you know mathematics, you know how to think logically, and that's very important."
Yes, I understand what you're saying. As you mentioned, Professor Aroni, in his book Mathematics, Poetry, and on, literature. When I studied mathematics for the first time in Melbourne University some time ago, it wasn't in the science department. The department with mathematics was called the Department of Natural Philosophy. And over the years, that changed to mathematics and science, right? And very much I felt, and the lecturers also themselves felt that way, that we're talking about natural philosophy, and you can talk about reason, you can talk about logic. And so what another term that I did not mention, which is changing also, which is not only number sense, it's called mathematical reasoning. Right? Not necessary to be a mathematician in society, but to have mathematical reasoning in understanding events in your life or the community's life or in society generally. Right? I won't go into Ron Aroni and what happened and so on, which is interesting in itself.
And by the way, another thing, there is a lot of literature I came across a few years ago, a literature about the fact that the inflation of grades in Wesley, how do you call it? A very prestigious college in the United States, Wesley College, and he showed, and everybody today complains that the math skills is not good. It is deteriorated during time, because 20, 30, 40 years ago, for example, someone who went to the Technion could start his studies immediately. And now they say you have to go for 1 year before you can start studying, because they have to repeat all the mathematics and so on, because the level was so deteriorated during the last decades.
Yes.
So they wrote about it papers, and he called it that there is an inflation in the Wesley college grades.
So I'll leave you with the thought, why do we teach simple fractions before we teach decimal fractions? And I've fought for years and years to change the order. The children live in a decimal society. I'm not talking about America except for money. But that will change as well, a metric system. We live in a metric system. Why teach?
Yes, why teach fit and so on?
Dividing fractions instead of understanding the decimal system at an early age? Anyway.
I think we have time for one more question. So Young, you want to, yes, ask, please?
Sure, yeah. I'm originally from South Korea, but since I was little, I lived in different countries. Now I'm, in US teaching, and I have my kids too who were born in US. I mean, they're grown up, they're in college and all high school. But so in South Korea, when people are learning math, we never use calculator until we go to college and major in mathematics. Whereas in US, if you look into education here, students start using calculator in middle school, which means like in 7th grade through high school, and then obviously in college if they're majoring in mathematics. So from my own perspective, I'm thinking like having calculator is very convenient, technology and all these digital, app support, those could be very helpful. But at the same time, you mentioned about mathematical reasoning, I don't know how much it's going to impact negatively with that aspect, because, for example, just daily basis use of math, like in US, we have to pay tips for eating out. When we are eating at the restaurants, we pay tips with 15 to 20% of your total bill. And in US, I'm so used to just calculating mental math and everything since I was little, so I don't need calculator. But I see a lot of Americans or a lot of people pulling out their phone or calculating 15%, 20% for the tip. So overall, my question is, I don't know how about the education in Israel for mathematics. Do kids use calculator at school? Because in Korea, we cannot bring calculator to school at all. So I've never seen anyone using calculator until, kids went to college. So what do you think, John?
Oh, well, a lot of water's gone under the bridge about using calculators in teaching mathematics. I don't think that's a big issue today. I don't think using calculators or not using calculators will decrease the number of people who are numerically literate. I don't think that's a problem at all. I'm quite in favor of using calculators at a very early age, but asking the right questions. Like I said before, the button 1 and 5 and 0 doesn't work. But I want to see 150 on the screen. You try.
How about in Israel? Is it do you allow students to use calculator?
On my calculator, number 1, number 5, and number 0 don't work. And I want to see on the screen 150. You write a mathematical statement with 1 operation, 2 operations, 3 operations, any operation you like, that by pressing the right buttons, which don't include 1, 5, and 0, you'll get me 150 on the screen. You try it with some of the children and so on at many age groups. I can make more difficult ones, but so it's not the question of the calculator.
It's the same equation. It's the same equation of asking.
And have to pay a tip, and not the people I'm worried about at the moment. I'm worried about the people who don't go to restaurants.
Samia, what did you say?
I'm saying that it's the same question as do we want to use AI to teach the students how to write? Of course, we want them to use AI, but we want to show them how to use it. It's more or less the same.
I wrote some notes for myself. It's a long discussion, the whole question of AI and the numeracy. It's still in its
we could probably have another conference on this.
very early stages at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But it will make a change. There's no question about it. But when and how and what will change in schools as a result of having the AI and developing tools is a very big question. I thank you for your attention and for the questions, and I hope you've respected my reflections.
Thank you, John, for your interesting talk. And I want to thank all our speakers today from different parts of the world. We heard about various aspects of literacy and among various populations, different ways of enhancing literacy. And I think the common denominator, if we speak mathematics, is the importance of literacy for life, not only for academic success, but for life. So thank you all, and thank you for listening, for the audience too.
And thank you, Michal, and thank you, Yaakov, and thanks all the presenters and the participants, and hope to see you next year. Thank you, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.